So welcome everybody who's joined us today here at Quantum for our webinar on recruiting and retaining the best staff by maximising workplace accessibility. Our presenters today are Peter Cracknell, who's our Vision and Blindness Technologies Manager in Queensland for Quantum, or nationally for Quantum and based in Queensland. And also, we're grateful to have Damien McMorrow, who's National Access Technology Manager for Vision Australia. So thank you, Damo. And I'm Rebecca Clark, and I'll be facilitating the webinar today. So just a bit of housekeeping. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands from which this webinar is being presented and pay our respects to elders past and present. And for myself, that's the people of the Darug country here in northwest Sydney, and Peter's on the land of the Turrbal and I always forget, sorry, Peter. Yuggera people. And is that for you as well?
Condamooka for me.
Condamooka for Damo. So yeah, so that. So just a little bit of housekeeping. So your microphone will be muted during the webinar. We will make time available at the end for questions, but we would prefer to do that via the chat. So if you're a PC user, you can use Alt and H to get there, or Command K on a Mac, or you can click the chat bubble, or you can put things in the Q&A area, which you can tab to as well. If you do have any technical difficulties, please also use the chat. We are recording the webinar and we'll make that available afterwards by emailing the link around. And live caption should be enabled, so you should be able to use those if you need. So, and just a bit of an overview of today's session. So we'll have a bit of an introduction with Peter and Damien about workplace accessibility and what we'll be covering in the session. We'll talk about what JobAccess is. Peter will do an assistive technology demonstration of some of the different options that we have a bit, and this is all for people with blindness and low vision, but we will touch on some options for people with other disabilities, such as dyslexia and stroke and things like that. We'll talk about adjustments for and productivity options, what might be considered during recruitment in terms of accessibility, and then the offerings that Quantum and Vision Australia can provide in terms of access to the workplace. We'll then have a question and answer session and provide our contact information. So I will now stop sharing and I will hand over to Peter and Damon. Or Damo.
Good morning. Good morning. I might kick off if that's okay, Rebecca. And
yeah, sure.
Just to introduce myself, I'm the Manager for Vision and Blindness Technologies for Quantum, and I'm also a resource for Vision Australia. Quantum is actually a separate business division of Vision Australia. We tend to specialise in electronic technologies that give access for people with blindness and vision impairment, but also some other print disability to computers and to text so that they can participate in education and in employment, and of course just as a normal citizen. So my role is to try and discover the best technologies that we can find around the world and see how they could fit into our Australian context, to help our team demonstrate them effectively, trial them with people both in the workplace, education and at home. Damien is National Access Technology Manager for Vision Australia, and I'm going to hand over to Damien to introduce his role.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. As Peter said, Damo McMorrow, National Access Tech Manager for Vision Australia. Been at Vision Australia for around about 10 years. Started out as an access technology specialist. Was sort of working with clients from all walks of life and all ages. And now I sort of have overall responsibility for our access tech service. So that has a number of moving parts to it. We have around about 45 access technology specialists operating out of our various offices around the country. And part of my role is to provide sort of field support to them. We also have an access technology help desk, and that provides support, phone and email support to clients in the use of their technology, and also provides support to business and government customers as well. And we also have some consultants who work with our government and business clients around accessibility, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So it's a fairly comprehensive service. I'm also totally blind. I'm seeing eye dog user, been blind from birth, and have been using, well, I've started using assistive technology in its sort of most basic forms when I was around about 7. So kind of been an end user of technology for over 40 years, on top of sort of my professional experience in the field as well.
Thanks, Damo. So this session, we hope will introduce people to the concept that vision impaired people could be very productive in society, and obviously in employment as well. I think there's a lot of stereotypes about where blind and vision impaired people can be employed. We hope that this session will help dispel some of the myths and maybe open people's eyes up to some of the opportunities for the employment of vision impaired people. So vision impaired people are employed right through all sectors of the workforce, from small businesses through to large corporations, government departments, education, and of course self-employment. And we shouldn't forget that a lot of people are self-employed. Maybe they run a company, it might be just a company of one, but there's a very large spectrum of opportunities for people in employment. Damo, we might just mention some of the sorts of people we work with, Vision Australia and Quantum. I was thinking on the corporate side, we've got some very large customers that we've been working with for some years.
Yeah, we do. We've done work for organisations like ANZ, Bendigo Adelaide Bank, Commonwealth Bank of Australia, Services Australia, the NDIA. We do work with a number of state education authorities around the country as well. And yeah, a whole range of different businesses in the education sector, the university sector, finance, government, insurance, all kinds of industries, really.
And the sorts of people that you've seen over the years, and I've seen, there's been some remarkable sort of placements of people, and they've had remarkable careers. Have you got sort of any sort of general example? You don't have to name any names, but the sorts of sort of arrangement of different people you've seen around?
It might be worth actually me sort of talking a little bit through my career journey, because I've done a few sort of non-typical work roles myself, and you know, it's sort of a good example of the good, the bad, and the ugly, for want of a better term, in terms of places where accessibility has worked really well and places where perhaps it hasn't. So are you happy for me to talk through that, Peter?
Yeah, great.
Yeah, sure. So I guess realized at a fairly young age that you know, when I was going through sort of the latter part of high school and also uni, that I wasn't going to be able to get a job, you know, working a checkout at Woolworths or flipping burgers at McDonald's. So I started my own small computer business that put me through uni. So that was doing sort of basic PC support for businesses, that kind of thing, as well as a little bit of assistive tech type work. I then went from there to Queensland University of Technology in my early 20s, and started out doing sort of basic IT support for staff and students of the business faculty there. And over a sort of 7-year period, I went through some junior and then senior technical roles, and ended up managing that team, which was about 15 staff. I then, for family reasons, had to make a move north to Rockhampton up in central Queensland. And because the move was sort of for personal reasons, I didn't really have a plan or a position to go to. So I ended up actually working a night shift in a bakery as a baker pastry cook for a year or so, because I had a 4-month-old daughter and we just had to put food on the table. And so we sort of made some very simple modifications to the workplace so that I couldn't get my fingers caught in the moulder that made the bread rolls, and did a stint there as a baker pastry cook. I then went to Central Queensland Institute of TAFE as their IT manager. So I was based in Rockhampton, but we had about a dozen campuses over a sort of 14,000 square kilometre radius, and so I was sort of travelling all through Central Queensland as part of that role and managing a team of a dozen staff. From there, I went to service delivery manager at Central Queensland University, as it was known then. And so that meant I was managing help desk, the desktop support or team, as well as audio, visual and video conferencing. And at the time, a lot of people said, who put the blind guy in charge of video conferences? But with the right accessibility, I was actually able to make that work quite comfortably. And because we were using video conferencing for teaching, and we're talking 2005 to 2007, video conferencing wasn't as prevalent as it is now. But we were delivering about 700 hours a month of teaching over video conferencing. I then sort of had to come back to Brisbane. My father was seriously ill, and family needed some support. So returned to Brisbane and worked for a statutory authority that was part of Queensland government. And that was really where I hit the first sort of accessibility barriers in my career. There was a lot of systems that were very old and very clunky and kind of slightly homemade, if you like. And there was also, they had a help desk tool which was not very accessible. And unfortunately, the vendor wasn't the least bit interested in working with us to improve it. They basically said, there's no return on investment. We're not interested. Go away. The end result of that was that I only, as a manager, had access to about 30% of the information that I should have had in order to make decisions. And over time, I lost confidence in my own decision making. And I think, obviously the team that I was managing realized that I didn't always have all of the information either. And so that had some fairly serious flow-on effects. And so I realised that I sort of had to make a change, and the role at Vision Australia came up, and I thought, why not, try to use my lived experience to try and prevent other people from having to have some of the same battles that I've just had. So that is and has become my passion, and what drives me in my day-to-day work is that sort of notion of trying to help other people with accessibility, help employers to make a more accessible workplace, but also help employees and show them what's out there, what's possible, and try to come up with solutions so that people don't have to fight some of the same battles that I have done. So that was essentially how I ended up back in the assistive technology space. And it does sound a bit cliched. I know when people say that if you find something you're passionate about, it doesn't really seem like a job, but actually that is how I feel about it. It's something that I am very passionate about, and that does feel very worthwhile. And I've done a lot of work over the years in that sort of workplace assessment type space, doing assessments for JobAccess and that type of thing. It was one of those scenarios where I didn't really know what I didn't know. And so I didn't really take advantage of JobAccess very much at all. And probably if I had have done that, and if I had have known that at the time, I may not have had some of the challenges that I did. But you live and learn, as they say. But that gives you a little bit of an idea of my career journey. A lot of people find it odd when I say that, historically speaking, there's never been a better time to be blind. But I say that because, as we mentioned earlier, there are so many career opportunities now, and largely that's because of the fact that we have greater access to information, we have greater options in terms of assistive technology that make workplaces accessible. 30 or 35 years ago, if you were totally blind, you really had 3 or 4 options that were along the lines of piano tuner, massage therapist, switchboard / reception / call center work, that type of thing. And whereas now we see, people working in law, finance, government relations and policy, IT. I've supported people in or done workplace assessments for people in everything from a mechanics workshop to their own medical practice, in pediatrics and that type of thing. So there are really lots more opportunities these days than what we've ever had before.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems, Damo, that there's the technology aspect, which has improved over the last 30 years. But there's also the point you made about communication, or the lack of communication. And to make this work, it's about employers, employees, HR, IT, all talking to each other, planning and preparing, and so that we set people up to succeed. It sounds like that wasn't the case for all of your journey.
No, definitely not.
And that's obviously part of your role, and part of all of our roles is to be part of that jigsaw of communication. You mentioned JobAccess, so I think probably we need to talk a little bit about JobAccess and what it is. So for people that aren't aware of JobAccess, it's a federal scheme. It provides money for equipment and for modification, and for some other services too, to enable people with disabilities to participate in employment. It might be that some research needs to be done, maybe some testing needs to be done, maybe some modifications to the built environment or to the IT environment, some training, or some assistive technology equipment might need to be provided to the employee. So we actually have done a webinar previously where we actually talked with JobAccess about how they worked, and we had some case studies and so on. And Rebecca will be putting up a link to that webinar. It's actually on the screen now.
Yeah.
And so that was one that we did a few weeks ago. That was a really excellent webinar where we had people who had been through that system, who had participated in the JobAccess scheme, talking about their experience. And we heard from the Georgia Miller at JobAccess about the scope of the scheme and the various ways that it operates. So I encourage anybody to look at that webinar, and also go to jobaccess.gov.au about how that scheme operates. Damo, one of the things about the scheme is it's not just about the initial employment, it's also about other things too.
That's right. One of I guess there's a couple of key points I'd like to make. The scheme is designed to sort of help level the playing field, so that because one of the things that we often hear from employers is, but it's going to cost us a fortune for any technology and modifications. And the JobAccess scheme, or the Employee Assistance Fund as it's also known, is designed to sort of level that playing field, so that those costs don't have to be covered by the employer. So normally we would sort of suggest, if someone's going, starting in a new workplace, that we would do a workplace assessment then, but there are a couple of other circumstances that might trigger an assessment. So they would be things like a change of role. So if a person sort of moved through the organisation and the role has different tasks and requires the use of different systems, we would sort of recommend a reassessment. Significant changes in systems. So if an organisation completely changes their IT system or makes a major change, then it's often worth doing a reassessment, so that the person's not sort of behind the eight ball and finding that they have problems and then kind of trying to work through them. And the other scenario is changes in vision. So for a lot of people, their vision does change over time. Conditions like retinitis pigmentosa, for example, where it can deteriorate slowly over time. In those sorts of situations, the technologies, the accommodations, and the strategies that person's using may need to change as the vision loss progresses. So, in that scenario, we also recommend having a reassessment, and JobAccess is perfectly fine with requesting a reassessment in those sorts of scenarios. So they're the common ones that we see, and it's absolutely worth doing in that scenario, because the assessment process really focuses on sort of what does the employee need to get done. So what are the tasks associated with the role? What are the barriers associated with those tasks? And then from there, what are the different options to overcome those barriers or challenges? And of those, which are the ones that we recommend? And then, from there, once we've sort of made those recommendations to JobAccess, they will assist in funding those modifications. And it might be, as Peter said, things like software or some hardware devices for magnification or braille or that type of thing. But equally, it may just be some training in how to more effectively use the technology you have, or some orientation and mobility training to help someone get around the workplace and use the physical facilities. It might be some small lighting adjustments, those sorts of things. So it covers a whole range of different considerations, if you like, and the idea is that it is very much focused around the particular role and the tasks that are associated with that role, and what the challenges are with that. And they are always unique to the individual. So it is a very much an individualized approach, tailored to the role and the individual and their particular circumstance as well.
And I think an important point on that individualization is that should the employee move to another organization, they can actually take their equipment with them. It's actually, as much as possible, a personal stuff that they could move from job to job. That's particularly also important where people are self-employed as well. And I should just point out that this is not a means-tested scheme. So it doesn't matter that you might be the managing director of a small business, that you will still get the same treatment as everybody else in terms of making your workplace accessible. Okay, well, I think that's given us a good sort of like scope to start with. I'm going to just do a little bit of a demonstration of some of the sorts of devices and technologies that we typically use and support. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my camera around and show you sort of like a typical office environment and talk to some of the equipment that we have. I'm just going to start with some portable electronic magnifiers. And Beck, I'm going to have to rely on you a little bit just to see if I'm aiming at if you can actually see everything clearly.
Yep. Yes, I can. That's great.
Can you also hear me clearly as well?
Yes, thanks.
Great. Okay. So on the bench over here, I have some electronic magnifiers. So these are what we call the portable electronic magnifiers. I'd like to start with those. These are battery-powered, rechargeable, and highly portable. So the one I have in my hand here, Damien, is a Clover 6-inch electronic magnifier. The idea is that not just within an office environment, but out in the community as well, you may have a need to magnify print. And with this, you can actually place the device on print. And by using a button, or by using pinch zoom in the traditional way we do with iPads and iPhones, we can actually magnify the print that's underneath the device very greatly. It's normally in color, but we can change it to a high contrast mode by pressing a button. And now we can actually switch between some high contrast color schemes, which have been proven to be beneficial for people with a low vision. A lot of people with low vision are very glare sensitive, and this also has a flow-on effect to their use of computers as well, as we'll see a bit later on. So this device is a 6-inch portable electronic magnifier. It can be used with a handle. So one of the things we can do with that is, for example, let's say you're in a factory workshop or some sort of retail environment and you needed to look at a shelf that was slightly distant. You can actually use this to zoom in at a slight distance. So we can actually look at a shelf, check a barcode, or perhaps a piece of equipment or a dial or something like that. So, for example, someone is doing electrical work, they could perhaps check some metering equipment and so on. So this is a portable electronic magnifier. Weighs very little and can easily fit into a satchel. We have ones that are pocket size that can literally fit in your pocket, and larger ones. The one that I'm now looking at now is actually a 13-inch screen, and it's called the Cloverbook Pro. Now this one, though it's not pocket size, it can actually fold up into something about the size of a laptop. When we have it opened up, I can place my paperwork. Just going to change the angle of the screen a little bit. There's a lot of reflection there. I might bring the camera over the top, so it's
yeah, that's better.
Yeah. Okay, so it has the same features. We can change the contrast and so on, and we can also change the size. Just got to get the screen up. The other thing about it, though, of course, is, and I'm just going to bring the camera down, we can also do handwriting tasks under here as well, so that we could be filling in a form or comparing dockets and that sort of thing. And finally, one of the important features of this electronic magnifier is it actually has got a telescopic camera, which I'm just going to show you here. And this telescopic camera can look at distant things. So it could look at the whiteboard in a meeting or an overhead PowerPoint presentation. And on the screen here, you would see a magnified view of that. So that's an example where a portable device could actually enable some of those things that are traditionally difficult for vision impaired people, which is participation in meetings and presentations. And of course, in the classroom for children at school, to be able to look at the teacher's face or the whiteboard is really important. So these are examples of portable electronic magnifiers. Some of them are just magnifiers and some of them have speech capability as well. So what we mean by speech capability is the ability to, what we use the term OCR, which means that we can capture the image and convert it to audio. I don't know if we've got enough volume here, we'll see in a moment.
Pilot might improve with credits for those affected. It can mean of many daily living and recreational activities essential to a healthy and independent.
So what we have here is the ability to read out loud, and you could have headphones attached, of course, so for privacy, to read out loud and see in combination the text that is being read out loud. So sometimes for people with vision impairment, they have visual fatigue when they are reading a lot of materials. So they can switch to an audio mode where they're actually listening to long tranches of text. Then occasionally they want to zoom in visually on a bit of detail. It could be a diagram or it could be a table of figures. But other than that, they would prefer to listen to longer parts of text. So these are examples of what we call portable electronic magnifiers and text-to-speech devices. We also have pure text-to-speech devices. I'm just going to grab one.
Devices in stand mode.
So
disconnected.
This is an example of a portable
exiting stand mode.
text-to-speech device called the Allcam Read, and it's about the size of a marker pen, and it can do much the same as we were doing with this device for reading, except what we do instead is we just take a picture.
And low vision aids. Many older Australians experience varying degrees of vision loss that can't be improved with spectacles. For those affected, it can mean the loss of many daily living and recreational activities that are central to a healthy and independent lifestyle. Quantum can help you make the most.
So the idea there was that you have a portable text-to-speech device, and it works just for paperwork, but also for computer screens, display boards, distance signs, signage. Anything that's print, it can actually read at any distance. So you can imagine that could open up an awful lot of possibilities for people in employment too. So this is called the Allcam Read.
And I think, Peter, it's worth mentioning with that it's offline, so it can be used in secure environments and things as well.
Yeah, that's right, Beck. And secure environments this is something that is an important part of the workplace assessment. So, for example, in call centres or corporate environments like the ATO or a bank, it's obviously important that you can't capture text and reproduce it or transmit it to the internet. So this device has a fully offline version, which means that it does not transmit information. And that has often been a deciding factor in the choice of this device over some other devices that do work online. So that's a very good point. Thank you for that.
That's right.
I'm just going to come back to look at some of the other equipment in this desk space here. So in a desk space environment, and I might just minimize the view here. So in a desk environment where we can afford to have larger screens, of course, larger screens are important for people with low vision. Typically 24-inch, 24-inch would be about the normal size, though of course larger screens have been provided. Usually they would be mounted on some kind of an articulated arm. Sometimes those articulated arms would have two positions for two monitors. In this case, what I've actually got is a computer monitor straight ahead in front of my keyboard. And in fact, my keyboard is actually a large print keyboard. And this is called a ZoomText large print keyboard, where the letters are in high contrast and larger than normally printed. Over on the left-hand side, I've got another screen, but in fact, what I'm doing is I'm actually using an electronic magnifier as a second screen. So we can use dual monitor with these two monitors, but we can also press a button on the electronic magnifier, and this is called the clear view, and switch to the camera that's mounted behind this, which is actually looking down at the paperwork that I've placed on the sliding tray underneath. This allows me, for example, to have a spreadsheet on my main computer screen and perhaps a docket or an invoice on my Clearview screen, which I can magnify. And as I showed you before with the smaller ones, change the contrast. So we could have a high contrast view of the invoice here. And on this screen, we could have like a spreadsheet, and we could be comparing side by side, just so that we can do some data entry that way. And of course, we could also handwrite under this screen as well. The screen can be raised, and we can actually just use a marker pen to mark things out or underline, tick, and so on. So this arrangement here, the clear view, is a very common arrangement for people with low vision to magnify and work with paperwork. This particular model also has the ability to do the text-to-speech.
Position the text inside the window and tap the screen.
So what we do with this one is we actually position the document. I'll just use a more interesting document. In the viewing frame, tap the screen. And in a moment, that will process that image to text, but also magnified view. So what it's doing is identifying the
low vision aids many older Australians.
So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so you can see what's going on. So it's actually identifying the zones on this document that can be read. I can magnify with, I'll just bring the zoom out a little bit. There's some touchscreen controls at the lower part of the screen. So you can see that this arrangement is principally for people with low vision. Though I do believe, Damo, that you've actually demonstrated this device yourself on occasion.
Yes, I have.
Zoom in, zoom in, zoom in.
And so now we have on the screen what I call a karaoke highlight, which tracks through as
Australians experience varying degrees of vision loss that can't be improved with spectacles. For those affected.
And we can change the colors, we can change the voice and the speed and so on. There's some simple controls here for speed. But more importantly, we can do this. We can use a drag to go to another part of the document and just tap on that area.
For more information, please call 1300 883 853.
So once again, we have the ability to simultaneously have the speech output and the original document. And we can apply various levels of contrast and reformatting to that as well. So this is a very popular combination for people in the workplace who have some heavy duty reading to do and writing tasks. And this one's called the Clearview Speech. Now, if I want to go back to just being a normal computer monitor, I just press a button on the control here. And what it'll do, it'll then just allow me to, I'll just zoom out a bit. It'll allow me to have it across the two monitors. And as usual with split monitors, we can have it so that it spans across the whole two monitors. We can have it so that it's some applications in one side, other applications in the other side. And when we combine this with screen magnification software, which I'll show you now, you can actually have one unmagnified for context and one magnified. So I'm going to show you a program called ZoomText now. And I'm going to share my screen. Let's try and get the other screen in, otherwise you see all sorts of strange effects. So I'll share the screen. Oh, can you see my screen there, Beck?
Yes, thanks, Peter.
Okay, and I'm going to start a program called Fusion. Now, Fusion is a combination of magnification and speech output for computer use. It includes a program called JAWS and ZoomText, both of which are sort of industry standard screen magnification and speech programs. Damien, you use JAWS every day.
That's right, I do.
As part of your normal access to electronic equipment. So what we have here is, I'll just move this out of the way. So the program can start automatically when this
Fusion Professional.
And the first thing that you may notice is that it speaks. But another thing that it can do, and Damien, this is something you use, is it can connect to an electronic braille display, which is what I'm holding up at the moment. Now, an electronic braille display, I don't know, Beck, if you can see that, that'll be my little window there.
Yeah. And you might want to minimize there's the videos coming up on the screen, I don't know.
Yeah, okay. All right, so I'm just going to...
Fusion, title bar.
Yeah.
Screen sharing meeting controls. Window. Screen share. Video port container. Context menu.
No, I'm not quite sure how to do that. I wanted to
Okay, never mind.
Leaving menus. Screen sharing meeting.
There's usually view
Stop
options.
share. You have stopped screen.
Okay, I'll just try and minimize that view.
Zoom minimize. Desktop.
Otherwise, it's really confusing, isn't it? It's, okay, and
Zoom windows group.
actually, I might just do this rather than sharing. I'm just going to do it with the camera. It might be just a bit easier. Okay, so what you might see on the screen here is I have now magnified my computer screen 1.8 times. I can adjust this magnification either with the spin control on the screen or by using a key combination. And on my ZoomText keyboard, I could just use some of the function keys across the top. So in this case,
2.2.2.3, 3.4, 4.5.
now you can see that I'm at 4.5 magnification, and I've also made some enhancements to my mouse pointer so that I've got a large mouse, and I've also got a circle around it just so I can identify where I am with my mouse. Sometimes people with retinitis pigmentosa and other field of view conditions will need something to move in their field of view so they can find the mouse. And then we can actually interact with our programs like Word and so on. You can see that we have now a very magnified ribbon across the top. And of course, a typing area, which is tracked as I type. And spoken out loud. You don't have to have it speaking, of course. You could have the speech off and just use the magnification. And on my Braille display, if I'm a Braille reader, it's actually tracking in Braille exactly what I'm writing on the screen, which is very important where you want to be very precise about what you're reading and writing. So the other thing that I mentioned before was that glare is an issue. And one thing that we can do to help with that is apply some contrast controls. So I'm just going to press a button and switch to a dark background. And I could have chosen other different backgrounds too, to minimize the amount of glare that's on the screen. So that's in the areas of vision impairment, that is some of the technologies that we use. Of course, I also mentioned that we use some other technologies for people who have other disabilities or other reading difficulties, such as dyslexia and so on. So an example of that would be, and I'm just going to switch off the Fusion program.
Fusion. Document.
An example of that would be where people have, say with dyslexia, perhaps they may have difficulties with homophones and that sort of thing. So there are programs, for example, Text Help Read and Write, which can apply some productivity tools for people to use with their regular Word, Excel, and so on. So it places a toolbar at the top of your screen, and then when we're working, say, with Word, we can do things like, for example, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so you can see that. On the toolbar, we have word prediction, we have dictionaries, and similar word checker. So that, for example, where you have words that are easily confusable, this can give you a list of options for different versions of the word. I'm just going to show you prediction briefly. So when people are typing, it's sometimes useful to have and I'll just zoom in on that. It's sometimes useful to have a prediction of the word, which people can pick from. So if I'm just doing something like, and let's say I wasn't sure how to spell
psychiatrist.
psychiatrist, all I need to do is I can actually just hover over the word in the list and it'll be spoken to me, so I know that's what I want, and I can just click on it. And then predicts the next word. So this can be very useful for people who are quite good auditory. They know how things are pronounced, but they're just not quite certain or confident with the spelling. And of course, spelling is crucial in the workplace, of course. So these are extra tools above and beyond the normal spell checkers and so on, and grammar checkers that we have in Word. Other people with other physical disabilities, for example, they may have some motor difficulties, maybe through cerebral palsy or through motor neurone disease or MS. They may need some alternatives to the keyboard, and they can use some dictation systems like drag and dictate, or even within text help, the ability to dictate directly with talk and type. So here, it should be listening to me now. I'll just see if it, yeah, and it is, I'll just see if I've got that on the screen. I'll zoom that up.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And as I speak, it should type for me. Now, I'm not actually looking directly into my microphone, and we would recommend instead that people used a headset microphone with noise cancellation. So that, I think, will give you a basic overview. I'm just going to step back a little bit and zoom out. Here we go. A simple overview of some of the technologies that we can use. There's also on the horizon some handwriting recognition technologies and some whiteboard recognition technologies that are coming as well. So bit by bit, we're trying to address all of the barriers that we can as far as possible within the work environment. So I think that just is a simple overview. We might move on to talk about productivity. And Damo, I might hand over to you to talk about the sorts of things that we can do or you can do, especially around JAWS and some of those technologies to increase productivity and the adjustments that you might make.
Sure. I'm also mindful of time, so I will try to keep this section fairly short. So there are a number of things. If you're or if your staff member is a screen reader user, there's a number of things that we can do to sort of improve the experience and the productivity. So a lot of people think that a screen reader just speaks absolutely everything on the screen. It doesn't. It applies a certain amount of intelligence to what's spoken, but it also provides a bunch of shortcut sort of navigation techniques. So for example, if you have a web-based system that you might be using as a client management system or a customer relationship management system, something like that, then you can navigate around that content using, you can navigate by heading, you can navigate by button, you can navigate by editable field. So if you're entering a form where you're entering a new customer record or something like that, you could simply press E and it would take you to the first editable field on the page, and then you could sort of tab through. If you're looking for sort of the save button or the new button, there are sort of navigation techniques that allow you to jump straight to that without having to listen to everything else on the page in order to find it. That can, how well that works is a little bit variable depending on the software. So it's a good idea either as part of a workplace assessment to do that, or if you're thinking of putting a new system in, we can actually step through workflows with you and identify anything that's likely to be an accessibility barrier up front, so that and we can help to sort of train and educate your software developers and testers so that as they make changes to the system, they don't sort of break the accessibility in the process. But there are other things as well. So the screen reader does also have a place marker functionality, so you can jump straight to a particular spot on the screen. And we also have things like scripting. So for example, if you have someone who's working in a let's say, call center environment where the phone system is PC based, and every time they get an incoming call, there's a big green answer button that pops up on the screen, but there's no keyboard shortcuts for that. We can use scripting so that it would notify you that there's an incoming call, perhaps speak out the caller ID, and you could press something like Control-Shift-A to click on the answer button. So there's a number of different sort of workarounds and things that we can implement that can help improve the productivity of the staff member, but also make it a more pleasant experience for them, so that they're not having to hit tab 500 times just to get to a particular button or a particular control on the screen. So there's a number of things that we can do, and we often find that people who are, you know, very familiar with their assistive tech, once they get to know the systems, can actually move around faster than you can with a mouse. So the important thing, the important sort of message here is that with the right accessibility, someone with a vision impairment can be absolutely as productive, if not more so, than someone using a mouse and sort of more conventional navigation methods. The other thing that we can do, of course, is training to make sure that the person understands and all of the techniques and navigation strategies available to them, so that they've got the best chance of being productive and are navigating and using the workplace systems in the most efficient way.
Yeah,
thanks, Damon.
Thank you, Dana. That's really good. One of the things we should mention about the process of recruitment of vision impaired people is, because there's little awareness in the general community about some of the possibilities and abilities of people with vision impairment. So one of the things that's very important, I think, for employers is to have a very open mind during the recruitment process, especially. I wonder if you could talk to that a little bit, Damo.
Yeah, sure. So I think there's a few things. As employers, if you're interviewing, the important thing is not to make assumptions about what the person may or may not be able to do. Feel free to ask the question. Most of us would rather you did that than feel that you couldn't. And sometimes in an interview situation, I'll actually call it out and say, do you have any questions about how I might perform the role? Because sometimes you sort of get the distinct feeling that people are going through the interview process, but really they're not that interested because they've already decided that it's going to be too hard. So, I really would, as employers, I would encourage you to, as Pete said, have an open mind, but also to ask questions about how things would work. Feel free to say, look, we use this system. Do you know if that would work with JAWS? If not, can we test it? But also as employees, if we've got people on the line who are potentially looking for work, I would encourage you to be open as well about what options are out there and what and how you actually operate. I have had situations, sadly, where a recruitment agency lined me up for an interview. Said, yep, you're actually the most qualified person for the job. And then as soon as they realised I had a vision impairment, they rang me and said, oh, the role's no longer available, sorry. And that was because they had sort of put it in the too hard basket without asking questions about how it may or may not work for me. So, that's really important. It's also important that while we talk about, sort of some flexibility in terms of allowing the use of something like JAWS in your work environment and things like that, it's reasonable as an employer to expect that, if you're hiring someone with a vision impairment, that they can meet the same, can and will meet the same KPIs and will have the same expectations around things like career advancement. If you're doing a performance review, don't sort of assume, okay, well, they've got a job now, they won't want anything else for the rest of their life. As you've seen from my career journey, I've as it were, started at junior levels and worked my way through the organisation. And, so as having a vision impairment doesn't mean that we're not ambitious, that we're not looking for career advancement, we're not looking for professional development, because a lot of us are. So I guess that's just something to be as aware of as well, is to please not make assumptions that, that one job is the person's limit and the pinnacle of their career, because just like any other employee, they have the right to expect, that they would be entitled to things like training and career advancement. So, the performance review process should be sort of driven similarly. As employers, you should have similar expectations, and be aware that your employees, would expect likewise. They would have similar expectations of you as an employer. So, just worth having that open mind when it comes to recruitment and retention. And I guess retention's that's the important thing as well. We know that most of us, if we've got a good employer, will be loyal to them, and will stay in roles and quite often longer than others who might sort of be willing to, or be keen to sort of jump ship every 5 minutes to get a little bit up the ladder. So, but in return, we having those sort of conversations, providing the same level of encouragement that you would to other staff and that sort of thing is really important, I think, in terms of recruiting the right staff, but also retaining them and rewarding them for their loyalty and their productivity and that type of thing.
Damo, look, I know we're short of time now, but before we go to questions and so on, I think it's important that we just sort of maybe bullet the sorts of package of offerings that Quantum and Vision Australia can provide to employers and employees, of course, because it's all that conversation. So we're trying to coordinate this now better between our two organisations, and not just within the two here today, but also the digital access team at Vision Australia. So if you want to just run through some of the things that we can do, Damo, that would be...
Yeah, absolutely. So we have our access technology consulting service. So as I mentioned before, we can work through and sort of test workflows for compatibility with screen readers and screen magnifiers. We can provide some introductory training to software developers and testers so that they understand what a screen reader is and how someone who uses one actually navigates their system. And that's really important around awareness and that type of thing. As I said, we also have our help desk service, and that's available to clients, but we also offer it as a business offering to organisations that may have a few blind or low vision employees so that they can get sort of specialised help, or your IT departments who are supporting them can get access to specialised help. There's also services, as I said, like orientation and mobility, so that people can have sort of some familiarisation training around a new workplace and make sure that they're able to navigate it safely. We offer training in things like document accessibility. We have and training in use of assistive technologies generally for sort of end users, so the employees that have to use them, and that can be customized as well to using their assistive technology to navigate your particular systems. We can also do workplace assessments. So we do them for JobAccess, but some organisations choose to cover that themselves. And, we can also offer that service, on request as well, and actually identify what the challenges are or what they may be. So, there's a whole range of different services. We also provide through our digital access team things like accessibility audits and that sort of thing to make sure that your client-facing websites are compliant with the Web Consortium accessibility guidelines, so that members of the public who may be blind or low vision can actually access your systems and your online stores and those sorts of things as well. So there's a whole range of different services. We can also do things like alternate format production of material into Braille and large print and that type of thing. So there's a whole range of services available there.
And from the quantum aspect, we can also contribute to that process, mainly by the provision of equipment and the demonstration and trialling of equipment, just to make sure that the right equipment fits the function. Also, we can provide some consultancy too around our expertise with equipment and software too, which includes trial versions of JAWS, ZoomText, and so on. Beck, is there anything else that you would like to add about the quantum from the quantum perspective at all?
Yes, so we can also provide, as well as individual sort of licenses of the software, we can provide, like some organizations have chosen to have like multi-license user licenses so that it's accessible for a number of people, or they might be testing their own systems. We've also got a product called ReachDeck, which is sort of complements the auditing side of things, where you can have a toolbar on your website and it's got some other like auditing checking functions, so ongoing you can check the accessibility of your client facing side. And I guess that's also important if people are looking at your information in terms of applying for jobs, so as well if they're blind or vision impaired, or it's got things like the tools for other disabilities. So and obviously the training, we can do training for the employees as well.
And we did mention the Dragon software. We can do multi-user
licenses of that, and with the read and write, you can even get group and whole organization licenses of that, and that might be so that because it's relevant to a number of different disabilities, or can be even if you get reading fatigue or it's got ways to you can mask parts of the screen, so if people have focusing difficulties, it can help. If people don't necessarily want to disclose a disability, it can mean anyone can access those tools and don't necessarily have to disclose something that might not be completely obvious as a disability. So
okay, well, I'm aware of
thanks.
time. Anything, any questions or that we need to look at?
Yes. So if anyone's got any questions, please put them in the chat. We did have some that were submitted on the form. Somebody had mentioned that with some Braille devices, they mentioned the Polaris and Braille Sense being able, which are other devices, being able to join corporate networks. So we're able to speak to that about how that
I can address
works.
that. Yep.
Yeah.
So the Polaris, being an older device, runs quite an old version of Android, which is often the reason, because it doesn't support the modern sort of authentication standards. The newer Braille Sense 6s have actually just been updated to Android 12, so they don't have generally the same issues. Sometimes we find that IT departments get a little bit jumpy because they don't actually understand what this thing is. And so, I guess often what we say in those scenarios is treat it as you would someone bringing their own Android phone. You can utilize, things like the Microsoft Authenticator and Okta, and some of those sort of single sign-on platforms will work. But some organizations do block devices that have older operating systems because they see them as less secure. Given that the Polaris is sort of 5 or 6 years old now, I would probably be suggesting that in that instance, it would be a good or a sufficient reason to get a reassessment through JobAccess and potentially have a device like that updated to the, something like perhaps a Braille Sense 6, if the person still needs that type of functionality, but needs something a little bit more modern in terms of its operating environment and that type of thing.
Oh, great. Thank you, Damo. And somebody did also ask, how well do we advertise or use JAWS scripting services in Australia? I know traditionally there's been a low number of people that have been able to do it, but that's something that Vision Australia is starting to do as well.
It is. One of the problems or one of the challenges with scripting is that because there's a lot more systems now that are web-based, it's sort of scripting is not always the best strategy. There are other ways around it. But yes, we do. There are still a few people around the country that offer JAWS scripting, and it is something that JobAccess understands and will fund if need be. So in a workplace environment, generally what we would normally do is to sort of have a look first to see whether scripting actually is the right solution. Sometimes it's actually easier to work with the developer, if it's just a question of some buttons that are not labeled, that kind of thing. Sometimes it's easier to address it at the source, because the challenge with scripting can be that if the system changes, it can alter sort of the effectiveness of the scripts, and you can end up being locked into a bit of an update cycle. So sometimes our preference is to work with the software vendor or the software developer to sort of improve the out-of-box accessibility, rather than trying to sort of script a workaround. But so that's the sort of the first step, is let's have a look at it and see if scripting is actually the right solution.
Sure, that's great. And this question may have been addressed during the demonstration, Peter, but to say, what strategies and equipment may assist someone with low vision to access electronic presentations projected on a whiteboard or wall screen? But yeah, you had a look at the Clover book, and there's some others that.
Yeah, that's right.
That.
So there's magnification. There's also, sometimes you can take a digital feed from, if it's an electronic projection. So you could take a feed from that. That's often used in classrooms, for example. And then the emerging technologies are about being able to capture at a distance, in fact, using version of the Allcam read to capture the whiteboard and then process any handwriting to print, and then have that magnified and spoken out loud. So I think that should open up some really interesting opportunities in the workplace, but also in education as well.
Yeah, and there is, again, I can put the link. We have got a video, I think, that we did of that and a few webinars ago. So yeah, that's something that's still, hopefully it'll be around next year.
The other strategy that often works well, to be honest, and that is sometimes overlooked, is that if the person's using magnification on their computer, simply send them a copy of the presentation so they can follow along, and that way they've got it close up and they can magnify it to their needs, rather than them trying to sort of get close enough to the projector or screen or the whiteboard. So often that is an easy workaround, is to send them the presentation a little ahead of time so they can follow it along using the assistive tech that they already have.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point.
That's a good point. And I think it's also perhaps points to another thing about courtesy, and some of the things that you do, as you said, that example there could then be extended to the whole room, and this can actually benefit everybody, that kind of attention to detail and thinking ahead, thinking what's going to be useful for people. So as part of your corporate culture, taking care of vision impaired employees will extend to the whole workforce as well.
Yeah. There's another one. What technology or features of Microsoft, Apple, and mobile phones work well to record audio and playback easily? I guess there is a voice recorder on the mobile and things, isn't there? But that can be.
Yeah, there's a number of different apps for that type of thing. So in the Apple environment, there are things like Just Press Record is a common one that's nice and accessible. It has a watch extension as well, which I find really handy. I actually use that if I get dog guide refusals in Ubers and things like that, so that I can record what's happening. But so it is kind of a one-touch type option, and it does have the ability to transcribe the audio as well. So there are options like that that certainly work well on the mobile platforms. Windows, I mean, there are options there as well. Some of them are more geared to sort of audio production and that kind of thing. So it really depends on what it is that you're trying to record. Is it minutes of meetings, or is it audio for a podcast? If it was the latter, you were actually doing audio presentations, then there are very accessible apps like Studio Recorder from American Printing House, which is really geared to allowing a person who's blind to edit spoken audio. record and edit spoken audio. It was actually developed for their own narration studios for their library service. So there are things like that. But if you're just wanting to sort of take minutes of meetings and those sorts of things, then often you would probably be better to do that from a mobile device using something like just press record, and record the meeting that way. There are also options where you can use a digital recorder and then connect that up to Dragon and have it try and perform voice recognition and transcription and that type of thing.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that Dragon can do transcription from, so thank you for that. Somebody had also said that they needed software that will do text to speech and enlarge areas of the screen. So that might be something. Fusion does both of those, so I can contact people offline about that one. So there's a number of different options there. There's still OpenBook, and JAWS will also do OCR if you scan things in. There's a number of options there. Okay, somebody else has pointed out there's Ava and Otter as transcription. So I wasn't aware of that was one. So thank you for that from Stephen. So I appreciate the feedback there. So I hope you found that useful. So for any other information from Quantum, there's things on our website, quantumrlv.com.au, 1300 883 853, or info@quantumrlv.com.au. And thank you very much to Damo from Vision Australia. Can you remind us of so it's visionaustralia.org?
That's right, and 1300 Vision, or 1300 847 466.
Yeah, thanks. And I'll make sure that's in the email that goes around as well.
Sure.
So thank you very much, Peter and Damo, and we'll get the recording out as soon as we can. So thanks, everybody.